Well, summer's here and certainly at nanotechweb things are getting hotter and hotter, with new research developments gathering a pace faster than ever. And if you're still catching up with yourself and wondering where the last few months have gone, here's a quick recap of some of the nanotechweb highlights. We looked in depth at how microscopy techniques have developed since they first catapulted nanostructures into real-world view for scientific interrogation in the early 90s. In particular, we highlight some of the great insights offered by combining more than one approach for mapping nanostructures, such as when strain mapping, using a reflected laser beam and a knife edge technique, joins forces with magneto-optic Care effect tools to monitor strain-induced magnetic changes. And even fundamental techniques such as atomic force microscopy continue to make progress, as researchers at the George Washington University in the US demonstrate. They show how to systematically improve intermittent mode atomic force microscopy by taking into account the difference in resonance frequency of a free probe compared with a full cantilever system as it is when it's used. Of course, electronics was largely behind the surge of interest in nanostructures in the field's early days, and there have been some fascinating developments here too. Recent work in nanoelectronics has highlighted the potential of alternative materials to silicon, so far still the king of electronics, such as carbon. For instance, results from studies with graphene substrates have shown great promise. Adam Mikulich from the University of South Wales in Australia talked to nanotechweb about his work on fabricating horizontal nanowire transistors to simplify fabrication of multiple gates.
So what you do is you put some gold catalyst particles onto the surface, and they sort of collect the semiconductor atoms when you do the growth of the semiconductor. And instead of getting flat layers on a wafer, like you do with traditional electronics, you get these very narrow, very tall towers of semiconductor. And so what people want to do is make arrays of these nanowire transistors, and each of these nanowire transistors have a gate wrapped around them all the way around the channel. And for us, it was really just let's play with this idea and see if we can do that in the horizontal orientation. The vertical orientation is really good from an industrial perspective, but if you're wanting to do sort of fundamental research devices, it can be more convenient to have the nanowire horizontal on the surface.
Halfway through the International Year of Light, and we've been taking a sneak peek in nanophotonics labs all around the world to see what researchers are up to. Here, Pablo Alonso tells us about some of his work at Thick Nanogune in Spain.
Here in this lab, we mainly do optics at the nanoscale. For example, we use an AFM tip to get the fields around an antenna made of gold. These are calcium fluoride substrates. Here, by e-beam lithography, we fabricate thousands of antennas, and of tiny antennas that in length they might have 1 micron, and in width maybe 100 nanometers, and in height another 50 nanometers. And these antennas are made of gold normally, and then we shine light with it's polarized normally to the long axis of the antenna, and we create here this localized plasma resonance where we have hot spots where the field is confined and concentrated, and it can be used, because of this effect, they can be used to sense a few amount of molecules, for example.
The first spectrometer based on quantum dots has brought this technology from the either costly, clunky or complicated setups used today to a simple device a novice could one day use from their mobile phone. And we've had the first on-chip visible light source that uses graphene as a filament. Interesting new work from the European Magnetic Field Laboratory in Toulouse in studies of perovskite. Their unusual experiments use magnetic fields as large as 150 Tesla, and the magnet is destroyed in an explosion that causes the building to shake for each absorption trace.
We use a high magnetic field as a magnifying glass, which helps us to understand properties of the certain interesting materials. We take a sample and then we put it in something which we call probe. So this is usually a long stick which is equipped in the different kind of measuring tools, and then the probe goes into the cryostat. So the cryostat is placed in the magnet, and then the sample is really placed in the center of the magnetic field, and it's cold due to the surrounding of liquid helium. The sample has to be cold because there's a lot of very interesting physics which occurs only at a low temperature.
Their measurements of the exciton binding energy in perovskites go a long way in explaining why this emergent low-cost class of semiconductors makes such efficient solar cell materials. Even more remote from current devices, new computer architectures have turned to amoeba for inspiration for more efficient computing paradigms. Some more medically focused biological studies have seen the blood-brain barrier under siege. 98% of modern-day therapeutics are unable to cross this barrier, but Sylvain Martel and colleagues show how magnetic nanoparticles can open this barrier, allowing chemical molecules access to the brain. Of course, before you treat disease, you need to diagnose it, and researchers in Germany and Canada have shown that tiny biosamples can be extracted intact when they are blasted out using pulsed infrared lasers. The work was highlighted in the very first Nanotechnology Select, a new feature from nanotechnology to showcase some of the journal's hottest research. Keep an eye out for further fortnightly installments of Nanotechnology Select on the journal's homepage at iopscience.iop.org/nano. More from graphene in the world of catalysis, as researchers show that encapsulating platinum nanoparticles with nitrogen-doped graphene layers improves the catalytic activity of the particles while making them more resistant to degradation. Well, that's all we have time for today, but as always, there's lots to look forward to, with more web movies of nanophotonics researchers around the world, Nanopolis in China, KTH Oil Institute of Technology in Sweden, as we continue to celebrate the International Year of Light. And we'll be doing a special spotlight on DNA sequencing as we look at some of the very latest developments as featured in the Nanotechnology Focus Collection, as well as heading over to one of the labs in Stockholm where some of the work was carried out. We'll also be looking at big data in nanotechnology, and if you haven't got your nomination in already, don't miss the deadline for the Nanotechnology Young Research Award coming up in October. Of course, one of the ways to ensure brilliance in your own career is to keep your ear to the ground, so stay tuned.